Hey smart people, it's Toby Salami again. Now this is not one of my regular videos. This one in fact is a comparison between the Bricks Builder components and the JetEngine component as you know it. Now I'm gonna go over this and assume that you're a complete beginner and have absolutely no idea what components are or what to do with it. But I'm also gonna assume that you already know how to build the very basics of dynamic websites, such as building metafields or creating metafields and actually connecting those metafields to widgets that can be used in the front end. If that too is sounding very fancy, still stick around and I'm going to try to explain this as simply as possible. Now, keep in mind first of all that Bricks Builder components are not ready to be used on live sites. It's currently in beta, but it will be released sometime in the future. Let's take a very brief look at how components are meant to work. This is a very simple template I've copied over from Bricks, and if you don't know what Bricks is, you should check that out. They're very good at designing custom templates for you. This video is not sponsored by Bricks, but I just thought to give them a shout out here. Now, here is a very simple template. You have 3 cards inside of here, and sometimes if you want to create something like this, you would think this is a very practical example of creating a simple listing, right? When you create a listing of items, you would have to create maybe a CPT in the back end, that's a custom post type in the back end, or you want to create something like a repeater in the back end and fetch that using a query and bring that here using a query loop in the case of using a Bricks Builder, or you would want to do that using JetEngine listings, right? But when you use components, it's a bit different from doing that, and I'm going to show you that. It's essentially going to achieve the same purpose in this instance, but I want to do it differently. Let me show you how. If you look inside of the structure panel on the right hand side here, you see you have this grid of 3 items, 3 card wrappers as you can see inside of here. Selecting each one shows you the one that's currently selected. Very easy, right? Let's delete 2 of these 3 wrappers. We can just delete the last one and delete the second to the last. And now you have just 1 card wrapper here. Now you don't want to copy this all over the sides, everywhere on the sides, and then find out there is something you need to change. Let's say not in terms of styling now, but in terms of structure. Maybe you need to move this one to the top, for example, and then you have to go through all of the instances of this card to make that change. These components would work just as it works inside a tool like Figma if you're already used to working with a tool like Figma. So here is how you would do it. You would come inside of that card wrapper, just like this. You would right-click it, and then you would click on Save as Components. Now you would be met with a pop-up like this that shows the name of that particular block that you're trying to make a component. Now, you can choose to just call it whatever you want. In my case, I want to call it Card with Man. Whatever you want to call it is entirely your choice. Then inside of category here, you want to add a new category. You can just click on that and add a new category. Let's say this is under what we would refer to as cards. I mean, again, you can call this whatever you want. Once you've selected that, you want to click on this plus icon here, and it adds a new category. Not categories as you already know them, like terms, but categorizations inside of the component section on the left. You can very easily select a description here if you choose to. For example, I can call this cards to be used on the site, something like that. Next, you want to click on Create, and once you create that component, you can see now that you have this purple-ish stuff on the top left side here. And you also see on the right side that the structure panel is all gone. It appears as though you are editing a listing, like you've gone to a different part of the builder and you're editing that particular listing item. That's essentially how it looks now. If you click out of it, it simply just leaves that particular instance and you're no longer editing that. If you click on it again, you're not currently editing it. You can in fact begin to add what you would now know as metafields, but would be called here properties. They're not essentially metafields, but they function in a very similar fashion. I'm going to show you that in a bit. But take a look at how you can edit the component instance itself. You just need to come to the right here for this one as an example, and you need to right click on that purple-ish stuff you see there, and just click on Edit Components. Now you're inside of that component. You can select each of the stuff. You can move things around. Let's click out of it again. And let's see what can happen if we just, duplicate this, make this a second card inside of that grid. It's simple. It's what you know it to be. It's, pretty simple, right? But now you see, you no longer see the children of that particular card wrapper anymore, right? You don't see that anymore. What you simply see is the component called card wrapper. Now you need to right click on it and click on Edit Component. editing the component, edit the items inside of that component. Let's say you select any item like this, and then you want to move the heading below the address like this. You see it moves in both instances of that component. And that's pretty sleek. That's good. Now let's return that back to how it was. Control Z. We're going to click out of that component again, and then we're going to select any of these component items. Let's say the first one here. And over here on the left, you see properties. You can create a new property. Now, what are properties? They're essentially like metafields. You know how you would create a listing item, and then you need to create a metafield, let's say a text metafield, and then you need to map that metafield to this heading widget, for example. That's essentially how properties work here, except they can work for multiple scenarios. Let's give an example here. Let's create a property. Let's say this property is, of course, we're going to select text now because we know we need a text type for a heading widget, right? And if we're not sure, we can click to that heading widget and we can take note that this is a simple text field. So let's click out again, click on that particular component and click on create properties. Now we're going to select this text property type and we're going to give it a name. Let's say we want to call it location title, something like that should be fine. And we want to come down here and give it a default. Let's say the default would be Detroit. So let's call it Detroit and click on create. Before that, you can choose to add a description. It's absolutely your choice. Now you want to click on create. Once you create that, you see it does nothing to this grid right here. Nothing to the card. It absolutely does nothing, except it just adds this new item that looks and feels like a metafield. Now, the next thing you want to do is essentially what you would do if you were creating a metafield. You would connect the metafield to a particular heading widget, right? So let's do that. Let's click on connect, which you see on the top left here. Once you click on connect, you want to come inside of any of the items you want to connect it with. Let's say these heading widgets, for example, and you see this small plus button right here. You see it says connect property, and then in bracket it says the property type that it accepts. It accepts text in this particular situation, so that's good for us. We want to click on that and select the property type we want to connect. So let's say we want to connect location title, we connect that. And as you can see, it returns the default for us. If we click out of this and then click on any of this property instance, you see that particular one, since it has now been connected to something, gives you a field for you to fill. It's essentially working like a metafield, except that you are creating these things on the fly. So let's add a location title for this particular instance and see what happens. Let's change this to New York, for example. Can you notice what's going on here? That it's only changing in this particular instance and not changing in this one. If we duplicate this, for example, and we take a look at what's happening here, we see that the last one also carries the default, which was Detroit, right? Let's select another one. Let's say this one, and we want to change the location title for the one in the middle. We want to change it to something like Ontario. Let's call it Ontario. You see, it's changing for this particular instance. That's how metafields would work, right? So it's essentially changing it for this particular instance, and that's good. Now, a component will not only work for this particular situation, it could also work for things like the address field for this particular map. Each of these map items could have a component to be modified. Let's test that out. We can click inside of any of the components. Of course, it's not going to edit it automatically. You can either click on edit properties here by, clicking on edits right there, or you can right click on that item in the structure panel on the right and click on edit component. Either way, this is good for us. We can now click on properties and create a new property and maybe create this one for the address field. But you may want to ask, what are we going to use as the property type for an address field? To know that is very simple. You're just going to click inside of it, select that particular map and see the address field right here. You can see that small plus icon right there. You can see in brackets it says text. So you know it accepts a text field property type, right? So that said, let's come back inside of here by just clicking on this small arrow here, come back to that particular instance and click on edit properties again. Now you want to create a new property like you would create a new metafield, except this is not a metafield. Okay, I'm trying to connect the dots in your head here. Muscle memory, building up, right? Let's create a new text field right here. Let's add the property type and call it address for instance. Call it whatever you want, it's your choice. You can choose to add a default, also your choice. Choose to add a description, your choice. In this case, I'm going to leave it as is and click on create. Now that we have that done, you know what's next, right? You can see it already written here that you have some unconnected properties. So let's connect them. Let's click on connect. I'm going to come inside of that map field and want to click on that small plus icon right there and select address for instance. Excellent. Now that's what's going to be used to enter the address for each of the instance of these components. Now inside of address for this instance, you can then choose to add an address and that will work for each of these instances. Now a question may be on your mind. Why not just create a listing? Create a simple repeater field with metafields and then create a listing, or you can create even something as simple as a CTT and then query that and return that inside of a listing. Why not do that? Why create a component? Why do this on the fly? Because of course, I just told you right now, you're doing it on the fly. That's one advantage of using components. Secondly, you can place this wherever you want. Let's imagine that you want to take one of these component designs and put it just below the heading widget here. How would you do that? It's pretty simple. You would drag that right above here. I mean, how would you do that if you were supposed to do that as a listing? It's going to be pretty difficult. You're going to be thinking about listing grids injections and stuff like that. It's pretty complicated. But doing this way just makes things quite simple. Plus, this is not the only use for components. I know if you've watched other videos where they talk about components, you may be thinking to yourself, is this the only situation where we can make use of components? Well, no. There are various methodologies for using components. In fact, I recommend one to you right now. Go to Google and just type atomic design. When you search for that, you're going to find here this website by Atomic Design by Brad Frost. And I implore you to go through this atomic design methodology. You're going to learn about how designing systems using things like atoms, molecules, organisms, templates, and pages as is in this particular website and how it's described here can help you achieve a better design structure, can do a lot of good for your web development and make your dynamic web design a breeze. In the end, what you have is a bunch of components, lots of components on the site, which help you make up a very fast moving website. But that demands that we have components inside of components. And right now, it's technically impossible inside of Bricks. If you check this Bricks Builder component right now, I'm just going to try to do that inside of this other component here. Let's test if that's going to work. Does it? Nope. Let's try to see if we can maybe make this grid a component on its own. Let's right-click that and click on Save as Component. Will it work? Let's see. Let's call that grid components. See if it works and click on Create. Does it work? Nope. Everything just goes away. That doesn't work. Let's undo. And after we undo, we have what we had before right there on the page. Okay, that's Bricks Builder component. A simple, very, very simple overview. Let's see how JetEngine component works in comparison to this. Want to come back inside of JetEngine here, you see once you install JetEngine, you have JetEngine here and you have listing and components as one of the items right here. Now, let's add a new component. We can call this component whatever we like. We can select the component view, whether it's bricks or blocks. So if you have Elementor installed, you would also have the Elementor option inside of here. And that, of course, to me, feels like the very first advantage of JetEngine components over Bricks Builder components, because it can work across builders. You can use it with bricks, with blocks, and with Elementor. That's a good thing. Now let's create this component. With ease of use, I don't think it's as good as bricks, but let's try it out. Let's say we want to create a simple component right now, and we want to call this card components. Then we want to come inside here and create a component. Now, it loads what appears to be a regular Bricks Builder template, like you would be creating a listing. It's that simple, okay? Let's paste that inside of here. So here, as you can see, you have everything that makes up your card right here. It's that simple. Once you click on Save and you come back inside the builder and just refresh this, let's see what we have now. I have taken away the other cards that were created with Bricks Builder components, and I want to show you how JetEngine components stacks against it. Now, after creating the card component inside of JetEngine here, you can check if you see it among the Bricks Builder widgets by simply coming inside of Elements through Components. You don't want to come inside of Components here. You're going to see the components created with the Bricks Builder components. But if you check inside of Elements here and search for the components created with JetEngine, you would find it right here. You see card component right here? there it is. So it's part of the regular elements in the Bricks Builder website, okay? So you want to drag that and put that inside of the card grid right here. You see, it's pretty simplistic. It's how we expect it to be. It's unstyled, that's okay. All we need it to be is our component. You take note inside of here that when you check inside of general, you simply have this component context and that is it. But we need a way to be able to manipulate each item inside of our component. Using Bricks Builder component, you just simply click into it or right click on the component here and click on edit component. There is no such thing here with JetEngine components, which to me, I would feel is a downside in this case, but there are many upsides to it and I'm going to show you that right now. So let's go to the dashboard and see how JetEngine components are set up. We're just going to add a new tab here and just enter into that dashboard. Inside of the dashboard here, you want to come inside of JetEngine. All you want to do is select JetEngine, listing and components. Great. Now, inside of the card component here, you notice here you have edit component settings. This is key. This is where things get very important. Once you click on edit component settings, you can now add content controls and you can also add style controls, which is very, very good. A very good upside to JetEngine components right here. So let's simply add a simple content control. Let's add a new control that's going to control for us this heading widget right here. We're going to call it heading of lists. It's not a very creative name, but it does the job for us. You notice we have a control name automatically created for us, and we're going to leave the control type as text. Of course, you see, you also can select, just as you can do inside of Bricks, you can also select text, text area, rich text, select, which is excellent for you to be able to limit the amount of things a person can select from. And you also have the single media, which can help you select things like pictures, videos, and stuff like that. But let's say we want this to be text. We select that, and inside of here, we want to click on save. Once we save this, just like that, it's saved. If we come back inside of the card component here, and let's just refresh that card component so that we have it up to date. This is not something you would do with the Bricks Builder components, but you have to do with JetEngine components. Now select the widget that you want to connect to that component. Let's say New York, for example. We're going to select that, and you see you have no sample plus sign somewhere that you can click on and connect that component item. I understand. It's all right. For this one, you're going to make use of dynamic data to actually do the connecting. So we want to select that, and inside of here, you want to select this JetEngine component card component option here. As you can see, once you create properties for any of the components, you have a new JetEngine component section created for you and the component name inside of a bracket right here. Once you select that and you scroll a bit, you see that particular component control right there. You want to click and select that. Now take note that this one simply adds as a very simple dynamic tag for you to make use of. In fact, you can add other things along with it. You may want to give your clients the ability to make a change to a part of a text and not every single aspect of that widget. This is now available for JetEngine components, so I'm good with it. For now, let's just take off that New York part. And once we take that out, you can see that now all you have is a dynamic data tag that will be replaced with whatever we add inside of our editor. Let's save this and let's come back inside of the builder right here. We'll need to refresh because of course this is not something that updates automatically. Once we refresh, we're going to select that card again. But this time we're going to be able to select and change specific items which we've specified inside of that card. So if we select this one, for example, and inside of general, you see heading of list, you don't see any heading here, and that's because we didn't select a default. We didn't add any defaults to it. So if we decide to make changes to this particular component, you see here that you can make that change. Here we can type in New York, and you see it right here, it's inside of that card right now. You can also type whatever you want inside of here, and it will just show the exact way you want it to. This is pretty good. Let's say, for example, you need to add another specific instance of this component. You can do that. You can come back inside of components here. You want to search for the component that you had created. That's the card component here. You want to drag that inside of here. I want to put that right here next to the other one. That's it. Good. You see it has no heading because there is no default, or you can make use of a dynamic data tag to fetch what's going to be the heading for that particular card. So let's say for this one, we want to type in Cameroon. And you see for this instance of the exact same component, you can make changes to their content. This is very good. But you have this big question. Can we add a component inside of a component? Yes, we can. Not by dragging it here inside of this one, it will just not work. But you can do something like come inside of a component, like an existing component here, and select inside of the list of components here another component which you've created and drag it inside of here. It will work like a breeze. Do you want us to test this out? No, I'm going to leave that to you to do your testing. Let me know what you find and please leave that in the comment section below. There is more, of course, you can do with JetEngine components and also the Bricks components. I'm going to be showing you a lot of this in the future, and that's why you need to subscribe. This is just part 2 of an unlimited number of series that I have on this topic of dynamic components inside of page builders. In the future, I'm going to show you how to do this using your Elementor website, or if you use a block-based like Gutenberg page builder. That's it, my people. Leave me a comment down below if you enjoyed this. I'll be waiting to read and respond to them. My name is Tobi Salami once again, and until next time, my people, stay dynamic.